And first of all, I want to thank Herbert Kitchell for putting this conference together, as well as the Duke Political Science Department, Duke Center for Latin American and Caribbean Studies, and the Duke UNC Latin American Politics Working Group for supporting this event. Today, I'm pleased to welcome you to the final event of the Frontiers of Political Science Conference, focused on Latin American party systems. In this roundtable, we will have a discussion with 3 young politicians in the region about some of the current topics affecting parties and political systems in the region. We are fortunate enough to count with the participation of Federal Deputy Tabata Amaral from Brazil, founder of Revolución Democrática, Carolina Pérez Dattari from Chile, and soon enough, Deputy Samuel Perez from Guatemala will be joining us. I also want to thank all our speakers for taking out some time in their very busy agendas to have this conversation with us. And then after the main sets of points and questions, we're gonna have a Q&A session with some of the people that are looking at us through Facebook and through Zoom to have a little bit more of a discussion. So feel free for everyone in the audience, feel free to leave your comments and questions in the chat box. So just to get conversation started, I want to present myself. My name is Mateo Villamizar Chaparro. I'm a 3rd year political science PhD student at Duke. I'm jointly with Diego Romero, who is a 5th year political science student here at Duke. We're going to be the 2 hosts of this small event. So if you have any questions or anything, just let us know. So our first question, and it's going to be a little bit more for both Tabata and Carolina, is just to present yourselves and tell us why you entered politics. Since the Colombian representative is not going to be here, you all can have a little bit more time expressing your points. So in that sense, I'm just going to go in the order. I have everyone in the screen. So Tabata, do you want to start?
Yes, of course. So hi, everyone. Thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you very much for having me here. Oh, sorry, someone is calling me. Just give me a second. Can we switch positions? I just need to fix something. 1 second. Thank you.
Sure, Carolina, do you want to go first?
Yeah, no problem. Hi, everyone. It's very nice to be here virtually. And it's very nice to speak about Latin American politics, which I think are being very, very exciting these days. So I think there's a lot to talk about. First of all, I'm Carolina Perez. I'm 32 years old, and I'm part of a political party called Revolución Democrática, Democratic Revolution in English. And it's a party that emerged from the student movement, which I was part of. And I think it emerged from a generation that has been fighting for public education in my country for at least 15 years. We had 2 big kind of revolutions in Chile regarding the student movement, which was in 2006 and then 2011. And from that movement emerged new social forces, new political forces, a lot of young political forces. We started Revolución Democrática when in 2013, 2012, and in 8 years we were able, just this weekend, because I'm very happy because of this, so I'm gonna tell it. Just this weekend, we won a very important amount of representatives in the Constituent Assembly of our country. So we won more constituent, I don't know how to say this in English, but more people in this assembly than the center-left traditional coalition. So that puts us in a very, very good moment or good fit to negotiate also regarding the new government. So it's a force that we started kind of 10 years ago, and I think when I was 22, so I was in university, and then 10 years after, we are able to emerge with a lot of force in the political scenario. So basically, I entered politics because as a student at university, we saw all of inequity, not only in our educational system, but also health system. Because Chile is also maybe the most neoliberal country in the world. And this is a economic system that was imposed on us during a dictatorship. And when we were in the student movement, we understood that to be able to change the rules of our system, we had to change the constitution. So I think the student movement and the new constitution movement in Chile are very intricate and are united because we understood that we have a democracy that doesn't represent the voice of people. So we have people very frustrated with the democratic system in our country, and that is what happened. Well, in 2019, when we have like this big revolt that led us to this new scenario where we are able to write a new constitution. So that's very, very brief description of what is happening in Chile, because it's a lot. So thanks for the invitation, and nice to meet you, Tabata, Diego, Mateo, and everyone that's listening.
Thank you, Carolina. Samuel, do you want to go, and then we'll give the word to Tabata?
Hola.
Hola.
Hola, sí. If it's okay, I'm going to speak Spanish because I do understand English, but I do not practice often, so it's going to be a little bit complicated for me. Bueno, mucho gusto. Muchas gracias por la invitación. Qué gusto poder compartir con ustedes y hablar de estos temas, sobre todo problemas comunes en la región. Y bueno, entiendo que es una presentación en este momento, ¿verdad? Que no logré entrar a tiempo. Bueno, yo tengo 28 años, soy economista guatemalteco. En este momento soy secretario general del partido político Movimiento Semilla y diputado del partido, un partido político progresista muy reciente. Acabamos de inscribirnos hace un par de años. De hecho, nuestra inscripción fue unos meses antes de iniciar el proceso electoral. Logramos algunas victorias importantes para nosotros y nosotras, sobre todo en distritos que habían sido tradicionalmente muy conservadores. Ganamos el primer lugar en el Distrito Central, donde yo participé, y otros colegas en otros importantes. Yo, digamos, tal vez el impulso para poder participar en política creo que es similar al de otras personas que se han involucrado en nuestros países, en la región, casi que por imperativo ético, ¿verdad? Yo soy estudiante de economía. Cuando era estudiante de economía, tenía interés en conocer un poco, en ponerle rostro a algunos datos de desigualdades, de condiciones de vida de las personas, de condiciones de pobreza y pobreza extrema, entender un poco mejor qué significa vivir con menos de $2 al día. Y bueno, hicimos un viaje con algunos colegas para conocer un poco esta realidad en Guatemala, que no es diferente a la realidad de nuestros países en la región, y es absolutamente devastador, ¿verdad? Luego, después ya no como estudiante de economía, sino que como profesor de economía, es muy frustrante tener que ir actualizando los datos e ir viendo cómo aumentan la pobreza cada año o cada vez que se mide. Y saber que estas son decisiones políticas, no es casualidad. La desigualdad no es casualidad, las condiciones de pobreza. Y entonces, como yo había estado participando en asociaciones estudiantiles, yo fui presidente de la Asociación de Estudiantes de Económicas en mi universidad durante 3 años. Pues el paso natural para mí fue involucrarme en la construcción de un partido político y participar. Y pues por el momento pues nos da mucho orgullo saber que estamos tratando de innovar en términos políticos y tratar de desprendernos de las prácticas políticas tradicionales, pues que no somos ajenos tampoco en Latinoamérica.
Perfecto, gracias, Samuel. ¿Tabata?
Claro. Mucho gusto. Saludos a todos. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much, Mateo, Diego, for this invitation, for putting together this event. Thank you, Duke and Chapel Hill Universities, for the invitation. And also, it's really, really nice to meet you too, Carolina and Samuel, and to see that many of the things we have been fighting for in Brazil are also present in your lives and in your journeys. So I'm Tabata. I'm from São Paulo, Brazil. I am 27 years old, which is very different for our National Congress. I'm a federal deputy from São Paulo. So usually I am from Tuesday to Thursday in Brasilia and the other days in São Paulo. I come from a very poor family that migrated from the northeast of the country. I was born, raised, and still live in the periphery of São Paulo. That's how we call it, in one of the poorest regions. I had one very great opportunity in education that completely changed my life for the entirety, which came in the form of a math Olympiad for students from public schools that gave me a scholarship in a very good private school that gave me access to many opportunities such as a scholarship to study English, the possibility of representing Brazil in science international Olympiads, and that also put me in contact with teachers that understood that where I came from, in my situation, I needed much more than just a scholarship. So my teachers were responsible from my nutrition, what I was eating when I was in school, to making sure that I had the money to take on the public transportation. Because of them and because of all those opportunities that I had, I received a full scholarship to do my undergraduate degree at Harvard. But as soon as I arrived in Boston, I no longer, I realized I didn't have anymore that dream of becoming an astrophysicist, a scientist. Science had saved my life until then. But as soon as I got my scholarship at Harvard, I lost my father to drug addiction. I had already lost many friends and people who I loved, who were very close to me, to drug, to violence, to crime. And after all of that, it didn't make sense for me anymore to go into science. I wanted to continue my work with education. So I think that was when I started calling what I had been doing for a few years as an activism. I had already been a teacher. I had helped organize movements, protests, but I never saw my work as a political work. In fact, I didn't like politics very much. In the neighborhood where we live, in the community where we live, we still have vote buying. It is still common that every 2 years, a man who is not even the candidate will come and tell you that they have divided the community, they have divided the occupation, and you should vote like that. And well, that's not very inspirational. And besides that, and just a point to Carolina, I'm so excited with the gender composition of the elections they had. That's amazing. Like it really gives me a lot of hope. And in Brazilian Congress, women are, even today, which is like the highest level we have ever achieved, we are only 15% of our Congress. So growing up, I would look at the TV and I would see those white men who were much richer, who were very conservative, and I didn't think that what they were doing was something that I could do someday. So in fact, it took me almost 10 years of activism in education, in the classroom, working with municipal secretaries of education, doing research on this topic, to decide that, well, this might be for me. I like it or not. So when I came back from the United States after 4 years, I continued my work with education. I with other young people, not always young in age, but young in heart. We co-founded a movement called Acredito, which means I believe, which is a political renovation movement. And a lot of people decided to run in the 2018 election for the first time. We were not the daughters and sons of politicians. We were not. We haven't been raised in the traditional political parties, and our election was 100% impossible. Many people told me that it would be a miracle for me to be elected because campaigns are very expensive in Brazil. But well, we were able to do something different. In my campaign, I had 5,000 volunteers. I had over 400 donations, which is really different for Brazil. Usually you don't have people donating to candidates. And I was the second most voted woman in the country. I'm one of the youngest in Congress. And this has been a whole journey. Brazil is still very violent against Black people, against women, against indigenous people. In fact, we are one of the most dangerous countries for LGBTQI people, but also the fifth country that has the biggest number of what we call feminicidio would be gender, how can I say that? Assassinations, killings that are generated by gender prejudice. So that means that in those 2 years, I have received a lot of attacks, a lot of threats, and pretty much every single day someone will come and tell me that I shouldn't be there, that is not my place. But at the same point, I can see that things are changing in Brazil. My perspective is that people went to the streets in 2013 saying that traditional politics didn't represent what they wanted for the country. I cannot say that we have found our way as Chile is doing. Unfortunately, you have a president that is responsible for Brazil having almost 500 deaths, 500,000 deaths for COVID-19. Our democracy has been is being challenged every single day by the current government. But I'm very excited, like what we did in 2008, what we did last year with the numbers of young people, people who come from poor communities such as I do, women, Black people, and all this entirety of the country that has never been represented in politics. Seeing that we're starting to break that glass, that we are moving forward, gives me a lot of hope. And well, as I said, it has been a journey. I'm learning a lot. I've never done anything as difficult as this, especially in this moment of such a huge polarization, of so much hate as we have in Brazil right now. Of course, it's the whole way that the pandemic has been handled in my country makes you go crazy, because you know that so many lives would have been saved. But again, things are changing, and I'm certain of that. And just to finish, in my mandate, I work mainly with education, women's rights, the environment, and the fight against inequality. And I'm really, really happy to be able to connect to you all today. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tabata. And actually, you place us in a really good point to start talking about our first question, which is about party building. And listening to the three of you today, we've heard of really interesting stories of engaging in politics as young people, as women, as student leaders. And when we look at the recent past of Latin America, we see, especially in places like Brazil or Chile, that the big, what we thought well-institutionalized, well-organized parties have been fracturing. There is new movements coming out. In Guatemala, we have a history of extreme fragmentation in the political party system, where parties are just unsuccessful beyond one single election. And so the question for you is, in this line of party building, from your perspective as a political actor, what do you think are the main causes behind this problem of basically failing at building a viable political party? And how is your party currently trying to face this challenge and to try to succeed? And if you want, we can start basically the opposite order. So Tabata first, then Samuel, and then Carolina.
I'm very much looking forward to hearing to Carolina and Samuel, because the party system in Brazil is one of a kind. We have the biggest, probably we are the democracy that has the biggest number of parties represented in Congress. This is 24 right now. So we have 35 parties in our country, 24 have Congress representation. And unfortunately, that doesn't mean that we have 24 national projects fighting to convince people. The way that our electoral system works, and even the way that public financing of party politics works, makes it very lucrative for someone to have their own party and to sell it in every single election. Of course, this doesn't apply to all the parties, but the huge majority of the parties we have in Brazil don't have an agenda. It's really hard for you to say whether they are in the left or the right, and they make a lot of business, and they have found a lot of way of in a very non-transparent way having access to public money. And just to make it very clear, I'm in favor of public financing of campaigns, because I know that candidates such as myself need that in order to be able to run, but I pretty much didn't have access to public financing when I ran, because this money is in the hands of the owners of those 20 and so parties we have in Congress today. So just a few comments. Having such a big number of parties makes it really hard for a government to run the country, which forces every government that is elected to build a coalition that is very far from having one agenda. And we saw that in the years that PSDB was in power, but also when PT was in power as well. A second thing that's important to remark is that maybe because we have so many parties and people don't see themselves represented in those parties, our politics is very personalistic. So people vote for the person, not for the party. And well, speaking now as a political scientist, I believe in the importance of political parties to build strong democracies. And that's not exactly what happens in my country when you have so many, but at the end of the day, people vote for someone and not for a project. And just one thing that's to give an example, our current president, Bolsonaro, has been in 8 parties throughout 27 years. So just one example for you all. And the third thing is that, well, parties have and I think that speaks to the fragility of our democracy. They have a very hard time being democratic themselves. We don't have rules in terms of how many years someone can have, can be in power, can be in the leadership of a party. So it's very common for you to, and we call the party leaders as party owners for a reason. They have access to a lot of public money. They don't have to tell you how they are spending that money. They can be in power for 20, 30 years. Many times they will sell their support, and it's really hard for people who come from minorities in terms of representation. Even though, well, women and Black people are the majority of the country, it's really hard for those people to have a say in the political party system. So we are fighting a lot, and I think all those movements that started to act in Brazil, they are important because we have been asking for more democracy, for more ethical practices in the parties, for my space, for my dialogue, for more inclusion. In terms of my party, maybe it makes the point. So I am affiliated to PDT, which would be the Democratic Labour Party in Brazil. During the campaign, my party was very much for a social security reform, but once, because it was in the presidential race, but once it lost the race, they decided to move their position because of party politics. And they told me that a few months later, and when they told me that I should vote against what the party had been fighting for and what I have been positioning myself for, and I told them that I couldn't do it because, well, I was following my convictions, I had my word. They threatened to expel me. I said they could expel me, I still wouldn't change my opinion. And 1/3 of the party voted the way I did, but I was the only young woman among those people. So they saw it as a personal disobedience. And because, well, the young woman should say, we say in Portuguese, like, abaixar a cabeça. We should just look down and do whatever those big old men are telling us to do. So they went to the media. They didn't expel me. I was the most voted person in the party. but they went to the media for months and attacked me and told lies about me and had very sexist positions. One of them even said that he felt like as a father who had been hurt, and I had to remind me that he never put food in my plate, so he was not my father. And well, I'm trying to make fun of it, but it was really hard. Like I received live threats. I had to go on the streets with the police, and I entered a lawsuit in court in order for me to be able to join another party without losing my mandate. So it's not a very inspiring story, but it shows how much people don't like one woman doing politics. And probably I'll join another center left party. That's where I see myself. But I like to say there are some big things in our democracy that are truly supra-partisan, and sexism is one of them. This reality is faced by women in parties who are in the left, the center, and the right. So yeah, so we have a long journey in terms of creating strong parties that truly represent our population here in Brazil.
Thank you very much, Tabata. Samuel?
Sí, muchas gracias. Yo coincido muchísimo y creo que compartimos los problemas en la región muchísimo. En Guatemala, de hecho, el presidente actual, Alejandro Yamatei, es el cuarto partido por el cual compite. Entonces tenemos ahí un problema común. Más allá, digamos, de los problemas, creo que yo suficientemente estudiados acerca de por qué la volatilidad y la fragmentación en los sistemas políticos, digamos, asociados a los tipos de sistemas electorales, por ejemplo, o las consecuencias que tiene el presidencialismo, las consecuencias psicológicas de enfocar sobre todo a las personas y no a los partidos. Creo que hay por lo menos un tema que no ha sido lo suficientemente estudiado y que creo que es causa de varios problemas que implica este tipo de debilitamiento institucional de los partidos políticos en general, y son las barreras de entrada al sistema de partidos políticos. Yo lo asocio mucho al mercado, digamos, como en el mercado cuando hay altas barreras de entrada para una empresa, lo que sucede es que se constituyen monopolios, oligopolios u otro tipo de imperfecciones. Lo mismo pasa con el sistema de partidos políticos, ¿verdad? Tenemos un montón de marcas que simulan competencia, pero en realidad son básicamente lo mismo. O comparten financistas, o son los mismos candidatos que se van de un lado a otro, que al final de cuentas creo que esos dos son los problemas que finalmente ocurren. Los oligopolios de partidos políticos de diferentes marcas, pero con las mismas prácticas y la misma agenda, y el otro es el reciclaje de los partidos políticos. Es muy fácil inscribir un partido político en Guatemala si hay financiamiento ilícito, por ejemplo, o financiamiento del narcotráfico. Y es muy difícil si se intenta hacer de la forma correcta, como nos pasó a nosotros y a nosotras. El problema, al final de cuentas, es que en Guatemala lo que tenemos es fragmentación y volatilidad altísima, un número desmedido de organizaciones políticas. De 1985 al 2018 se registraron 98 partidos políticos en Guatemala, ¿verdad? Lo que no se dice es que estos partidos políticos muchas veces eran las mismas personas, ¿verdad? O simplemente dejaron cascarones electorales, vehículos electorales sin ninguna ideología compartida, sin ninguna agenda común. Más bien los incentivos están puestos para llegar al Estado y saquear el Estado, ¿verdad? Como la percepción más como patrimonial de los recursos públicos, y los incentivos están puestos para que sea fácil este tipo de cosas. Digamos, otra de las consecuencias es que la vida promedio de los partidos en Guatemala es de 12 años aproximadamente, ¿verdad? Básicamente nacen, compiten, ganan o no, y ahí acaban y mueren. Ese es el ciclo de vida de los partidos y dura 12 años aproximadamente, con muy contadas excepciones, ¿verdad? En la historia, de hecho, de la democracia, reciente democracia en Guatemala. Otro dato importante es que de los 72 partidos que han participado en las elecciones, más de la mitad, 40 partidos, solo lo hizo para un evento electoral. Solo 19 han sobrevivido a esto. En Guatemala tenemos 19 partidos representados, y el problema es que no se queda solo en los bloques legislativos, sino que cada bloque legislativo está totalmente fragmentado, ¿verdad? Entonces hay diferentes facciones, a veces hay 3 diputados por bloque legislativo y son 3 facciones, ¿verdad? Cada diputado representa una facción diferente. Esto es peligrosísimo porque lo que nos dice es que no hay una conexión real con una visión compartida ni del mundo, ni del país, ni de una agenda legislativa o política hacia dónde se impulsa un partido político. Más bien los tenemos identificados como el partido que responde a la agenda del narcotráfico, el partido del oficialismo que responde a la agenda de la corrupción, los partidos extremadamente, digamos, dedicados al saqueo. Entonces, ese tipo de cosas más que de identidades políticas o de ideologías políticas. Entonces, ese es un problema, digamos, el reciclaje a partir de altas barreras de entrada, y el otro es lo que yo menciono como barreras de entrada que constituyen como oligopolios de partidos políticos. Hay barreras de entrada en lo económico en Guatemala, no hay financiamiento público para los partidos políticos que se quieren inscribir, y la organización, los requisitos que son muy fuertes, digamos. El primero es tener organización partidaria en 50 municipios y 12 departamentos del país. Y el otro requisito es lograr firmas de por lo menos 25,000 personas que se vayan a afiliar al partido político. El problema es que el costo de oportunidad para armar un partido político es prácticamente dejar la vida completa. Como una cuestión anecdótica, yo era investigador de temas económicos en mi universidad aquí en Guatemala. Yo tuve que renunciar por 2 años a mi trabajo sin recibir un solo centavo de ningún lado para dedicarme a armar el partido político. Y como mi caso le sucedió a varios integrantes del partido, por lo menos de la conducción del Comité Ejecutivo Nacional. Al final de cuentas, lo que sucedió es que cuando competí en las elecciones y finalmente gané la diputación, cuando presentamos las declaraciones patrimoniales, yo tenía alrededor de tal vez $100 en mi cuenta de ahorro en total, ¿verdad? Y para todo el mundo le pareció sorprendente, pero en realidad ese es un poco el costo que uno asume a la hora de participar en política en Guatemala, ¿verdad? Realmente está dedicado a quienes realmente pueden darse ese lujo, no cualquier persona puede organizarse, y por lo tanto la representación tiende a distorsionarse a menos que de verdad uno lo entregue todo, ¿verdad? Otro problema para mí, y yo creo que este es un tema que debería reflexionarse más, creo yo, en la academia, porque creo que no está lo suficientemente platicado, es el tema de la barrera política, del requisito de 25,000 afiliados y afiliadas para inscribir un partido político, ¿verdad? Yo creo que el problema no está tanto en la inscripción de los partidos, sino que la representación que pueda tener en los congresos, ¿verdad? Nosotros veíamos cómo en países como España, por ejemplo, hay 4,000 partidos inscritos, pero no necesariamente eso se traduce en que haya 4,000 bloques legislativos, ¿verdad? Entonces, eso es un problema, sobre todo cuando esas 25,000 firmas que intentamos conseguir nos rechazaron el 80%. ¿Verdad? Por oposición política en el Tribunal Supremo Electoral, básicamente. Yo no sé si ustedes, mi firma, por ejemplo, la rechazaron 2 veces porque supuestamente era falsa y no sé cuánta cosa más se inventaron. Yo no sé si ustedes vieron en Netflix un documental sobre Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, donde a ella le rechazan precisamente para inscribir su candidatura, más o menos la misma cifra. Yo me sentí absolutamente identificado porque lo mismo nos pasó a nosotros y nosotras aquí en Guatemala. Otro problema que nos decían, por ejemplo, y la forma de argumentar por qué rechazaban estas firmas es, por ejemplo, que no tienen los registros unificados. El Registro Nacional de las Personas en Guatemala es diferente al registro de ciudadanos del Tribunal Supremo Electoral. Muchas, y nos pasó mucho con mujeres, con compañeras del partido, se inscribían con su apellido de casada, que es lo que tenían registrado en el Registro Nacional de las Personas, pero se afiliaron cuando no estaban casadas y no hay conexión entre ambas bases de datos. Entonces rechazaban la firma de una vez, por ejemplo. Entonces ese tipo de cosas sucedían muchísimo, ¿verdad? No hay figura en Guatemala no hay figura de simpatizante de un partido político. Yo puedo simpatizar y simplemente dar la firma para darle el visto bueno para que se inscriba, sino que simplemente la figura de afiliado o afiliada. Y eso implica otro nivel de militancia y muchas personas deciden no afiliarse al partido. Es un poco difícil romper esa barrera. El proceso en sí mismo, como una barrera burocrática, es muy arcaico. Para lograr las firmas, por ejemplo, necesitamos llenar una hoja de afiliación que solo tiene 10 espacios. Cada hoja de afiliación tiene que estar firmada por un abogado, por una persona del partido, lo tiene que aprobar el Tribunal Supremo Electoral, y eso hasta llegar a las 25,000 personas, que en realidad son 100,000 porque rechazan el 80%, ¿verdad? Y nos dan para poder hacer todo eso básicamente un año, ¿verdad? Realmente es complejo. Yo creo que estas barreras de entrada realmente desincentivan la participación y no logran conectar la representatividad real de las mayorías sociales, por ejemplo. Y lo otro es el tema del financiamiento privado que requieren los trámites, porque muchas personas no están dispuestas a financiar partidos políticos. Y además la ley no permite alternativas como crowdfunding o este tipo de cosas, es prohibido aquí en Guatemala, entonces es muy difícil. Y solo para el último tema, es que todo lo anterior lo tenemos que hacer sin decir absolutamente nada acerca de en qué cree el partido. No podemos decir explícitamente, digamos, las líneas o posicionamientos ideológicos, porque el Tribunal Supremo lo interpreta como campaña anticipada, aunque no sea partido político todavía y no estemos en época electoral. Entonces, prácticamente tenemos que hacer reuniones de 5 o 10 personas privadas en casas para poder explicar un poquito más detalles acerca del partido. Es realmente una tarea titánica, ¿verdad? Pero eso refleja un poco, creo yo, que las barreras de entrada no son casualidad, por supuesto, sino que están hechas para proteger a los partidos políticos tradicionales, porque si tuvieran competencia real, ya estarían fuera todos, ¿verdad? Pero creo que eso es un poquito los retos. Creo que las barreras de entrada inciden muchísimo en la falta de representación, falta de institucionalización de los partidos políticos en general en la región, creo yo.
Muchas gracias, Samuel. Carolina?
Well, Samuel, that sounds awful. I just wanted to say that. There's a lot of things I would like to say because I was listening to Tabata and also Samuel. I think we all know there are different kinds of bureaucratic economic walls to new forces, political forces. They're all different in each country, right? Some are awful, like in Guatemala, and some are a bit awful. In Chile, it was also a lot of work for us because actually with the Revolución Democrática, we had to go and also recollect a lot of signatures, like a lot, in the streets. And it's a very good question of how you're able to build or create tools in order to make change happen. And I think, well, actually that was the main topic of my research when I did my master's. I had the fortune of studying in IDS, in University of Sussex. And I went and lived for a while in Brazil because I did my research on PSOL, which is a left-wing party in Brazil. And they were doing a very, very interesting kind of coalition with MTCT, which is a movement of workers who occupy. It's a urban movement of occupation of land and the articulation of indigenous people in Brazil. So I wanted to see how they were able to imagine a new kind of coalition or even work together, because they had very different backgrounds, ways of doing politics, and they were facing an election together. And it was a very interesting election because the main face or leader of this election was Guilherme Boulos, who went for the presidential election. And some years after that, we were just chatting with Tabata about that. He was able to go to the second round in Sao Paulo for the prefeitura. I don't know how to translate that. I'm sorry, for the government of the city.
Mayor, yeah.
The mayor.
Mayor, yeah. Okay, thank you. So this is a topic that it's very interesting for me, and it was one of the main questions we asked ourselves in Revolución Democrática, because we started as a movement, not as a party. And we were a movement for 4 years. And we were a movement because we were very disappointed of political parties we also had at that time a political and electoral system that always made the two main forces win. So we had two big blocks or coalitions, the right-winged and the center-left one in my country, from the return of democracy. So we didn't have a third force from the return of democracy in my country. So for us to imagine the possibility of becoming a third force was impossible. So we started as a movement. And we also started as a movement because we didn't want it to replicate the practices of political parties that we didn't like. And we wanted to make different kind of politics, but we also wanted to compete. So we were like, what do we do? Like, we want to compete. We don't want to go with the center left coalition, because also in those years, we had a lot of cases of illegal financing of these parties. So there were a lot of politicians like literally bought by like very rich people in our country. So we didn't want it to be part of that kind of project. So we were like in a very difficult position, and we did an internal referendum to decide, where are we going to be a party or not. And I think the discussion we had for the election, it's a very interesting discussion, because we're like, we need to compete. We don't like the tool of being a party. Like, we don't like everything about it. It's a lot of bureaucracy. It's a lot of work. We don't have money. Like, in that moment, we didn't even have like somewhere we could join, like do meetings. We were just doing meetings in our own homes, like traveling from different parts of the city and the country. We didn't even have a space or money or nothing. So we're like, well, we need a structure. We need public financing. You know, we don't want to depend on like what happened to these parties asking very rich people for money. You know, we want to defend public interest. And on the other hand, the people that didn't want it to lose like being a movement were like, yeah, but we're gonna become a party. We're gonna have all that bureaucracy. We're gonna lose like our connection to the streets and social movements. We come from the student movement. That is like our space, our main space. It was a very interesting discussion, and we decided to be a party. And well, now we are a party. It was a lot of work. Samuel gives some examples. In Chile, it's not the same, but it's kind of the same. You know, you don't have money. You have to like have a notario. How do you say that? That is with you when you ask for the signatures. It's a lot of bureaucracy, and it's a lot of work. It was a lot of work, actually. We just finished last year. It took us 4 years to become a national party. And we were like first one region, then the other. If you have 3 regions, then you're national, but you cannot go and compete in every region. It's just very difficult to explain, but we did it. And I think the main challenge of being part of a political party that you created is that you want to do politics differently, but you have kind of inertia of how politics is done. So you have to be able to have like the political imagination of imagining practices that you don't even know. It's like imagining a color. It's impossible because you have never done it. And I think that's a challenge we always have. It's a challenge we had when we built a political coalition that is even bigger. So we started like, okay, we have this party. We are gonna work with this other party. This is a movement. They are not a party yet, or they don't wanna be. So we had to also build a structure of a coalition that was able to compete. But as we said in Spanish, but I am translating, I think in Spanish, I'm sorry. Like with 1 feet in the street and in 1 feet in formal politics, you know, in institutional politics. And I think that's a challenge. And I think that's a challenge we need to work on as young politicians, because we have a big, I would say, global crisis on liberal democracy. we need to walk towards more participation, different kinds of participation. And I take what Samuel just said, like when we started Frente Amplio, that is our coalition right now, we were like, okay, if people want to be part of it, do they have to be part of one of the organics within? And we said no. Maybe people want to be part of this moment of Frente Amplio for I don't know, competing for presidency, which we did in 2017, and we became the third force in that competition. We got 20%. It was our big explosion of the moment. And we saw, for example, a lot of Frente Amplio in Uruguay, because I think that's an interesting way they had at the moment. They're kind of in a different position they were 20 years ago or maybe 10 years ago, but of mixing informal and traditional politics. And I think that's a challenge we need to face. There are a lot of people that want to participate, but maybe they don't want to be part of a party. Maybe they don't even want to be part of a movement. Maybe they participate in their neighborhoods, but they can be part of a coalition. Maybe they're in a student union and they want to support, for example, presidential candidacy, or in this, or what we just had in Chile, that was a different set of lists for the Constitutional Convention. So I think that's the biggest challenge, and it's also a challenge to incorporate different kinds of participation cultures, and that's what I loved about being in Brazil, because they had PSOL, which is a political party, and they have practices of a political party that you can like or dislike, but also you have MTCT, and MTCT has a very, very different way of organizing the activities they do, the kind of like militantes they have. And then you have the articulation of indigenous people, which I think are crucial. Like indigenous people are crucial to like what I think democracy should be in the 21st century, not only because of the recognition of indigenous people, but also because of for example, how they understand environment, which is very different and very important in the global scenario of like ecological crisis we have right now in the world. So I think it's very important to see all those factors in order to imagine new politics.
Yeah, and I think this is a perfect segue to sort of like ask our next question in terms of what's happening in terms of representation. Both, like all three of you had identified challenges of being a woman in politics, being a Black person in politics, being a young person in politics. So I just want to go a little bit farther into that and just ask you, what are the main challenges like women and other people with non-traditional ethnic backgrounds face when they decide to run for office? What are some of these barriers you faced and how did you overcome them? Although you already spoke a little bit about this. And sort of in your opinion, what would be the most effective way to reduce these barriers? I'm gonna give the word first to Tabata, since she has a pressing time issue. So please go first, and then we'll continue with Samuel and Carolina.
Okay, thank you, Mateo, and thank you, everyone. So very briefly, because I have 2 minutes. So first, I'm speaking, from the standpoint of running as a young woman. And it's just, I just want to remark how much that has been present in my day since the very first day I told people I would run. I remember that in the very beginning of my campaign, this old lady asked me for a certificate of proof that they had let me run, as she told it. And when you look into Brazilian history, it has been less than 90 years since women were granted the right to vote and to be elected. And 30 years ago, women could not have a credit card in my country. So I understand it, but we need the change to be faster than it is right now. And of course, the campaign was harder for me because I was a woman. No one thought I had a possibility of winning, also because of what Samuel and Carolina already said. but because they would always say that I was not strong enough. I will not hit the table, as I say in Portuguese, and defend my positions. And one thing that's important to say is that in this whole polarization that we have in my country right now, and with the financing of fake news and so on, it always amazes me how much, both in the left and in the right, when someone disagrees with a position of mine, they will tell that I'm doing that because this old man told me to do so. And if they are in the right, they will say that this old man from the left, and if they are in the left, this old man from the right. But like, people have a real difficulty of understanding that, well, I think for myself, and my mandate is as legit as yours are. So this questioning is very constant, and again, things have been aggravated by the presidency of Bolsonaro, because he has no shame in showing how sexist he is against other female politicians, against the press. But I've heard in Congress session that I was stupid, I was not intelligent enough, I shouldn't be there, that was not my place. So that's a big, like, those things matter, and they make a lot of women reconsider 1,000 of times before they decide to actually go into politics. And another thing that's important to say, I mentioned before, but Brazil is a very violent country, and we have lost in recent years important female political leaders because they were women. We had Marielle Franco, we had Ceci Cunha, we had many examples in last year's campaign. We just had a transgender woman that had to leave Brazil because of the threats that she has received. And as I told you before, I have received threats myself. And when someone disagrees with a position or doesn't like me for whatever reason, they will never bring arguments. They will talk about my personal life, they will talk about my appearance, they will say, and they will threaten my life, and they will threaten me of rape and things like that. So I'm just giving a few examples to say that the cost is too high. The barrier of entrance is very high, and I'm well aware that things would be much worse for me was I Black, was I a transgender woman. And I understand that those barriers are so big that for some people, they actually have no chance in the campaign. But even when you are able to go beyond that, as so many people have been able to do that in Brazil, there is a constant movement to silence you, to make you think twice before you say what you think again, to make you think twice before you occupy a place of power. And well, there is only one way in which we can combat that, which is to have more women in politics. We have to show those people that we belong here, that this should be, speaking about the Congress, this should truly be the House of People, which is not in Brazil. So I have co-founded a movement called Vamos Juntas. Vamos Juntas in English doesn't work so well. Let's go together, but we have how to say that only for women in Portuguese and Spanish. And we supported over 50 candidates last year. 11 of them were elected. The majority of them were Black. We have candidates with disabilities. We had a transgender woman as candidates. And well, to show that this change has started, and I'm very proud of the work we are doing with this movement. And because again, as I said, and as Samuel and Carolina also told, there are some problems with our party system that are truly super party. They happen the whole political spectrum. And that's one that I don't think we are able to handle only from within. I do think we need movements coming from the society in order to change this situation. And only to finish, because I'm a little bit late, there is this study that I'm completely passionate about. It was conducted by researchers, female researchers from MIT, Harvard, Northwestern, and other institutions. It was conducted in India with 8,000 people. And it showed that in villages where female leaders were elected as the chief of the village, girls had better scores in math. They dedicated less time to house affairs, and they had bigger dreams because, and they tried to understand why, and they saw that this effect only worked after the second mandate of the woman, because people were for an entire mandate saying that she shouldn't be there. That was not for her. But then eventually they were convinced that, well, politics was also for her. And because seeing a woman in a position of power changed the whole way families look toward their girls. So just to say that I translate this study with a phrase that goes like, with women in power, girls have bigger dreams. And I think that goes to everyone, like with more Black people in power, with more LGBTQA+ in power, with more people with disability, with more everyone in power, we'll have our children being able to see themselves there and having bigger dreams. So I'm sorry it took so long. I'm truly passionate about this fight. But again, it has been an honor sharing this discussion with you. Unfortunately, I have to leave because we have an important vote going on right now. But again, it has been a pleasure. And if you ever come to Brazil, any of you, São Paulo or Brasilia, please let me know. Take care of yourself, especially in this moment. And well, take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Tabata. Thank you very much
Thank
for
you,
coming
Tabata.
and taking out time for us. On that note, Samuel or Carolina, Samuel, do you want to go next?
Ok, bueno, yo tal vez no sea la mejor persona para abordar este tema de las desigualdades en la participación, porque yo tengo todas las ventajas realmente y todos los privilegios. Pues yo soy hombre en la ciudad capital de Guatemala, blanco, etc. Pero lo que he logrado conversar con algunas compañeras del partido, lo que hemos visto, lo que hemos leído con otros integrantes y otras compañeras, sobre el tema de la representación, específicamente sobre mujeres y pueblos indígenas en particular en Guatemala, es una situación realmente compleja. La situación aquí es especialmente grave porque es el único país en la región que no tiene reformas encaminadas hacia democracias paritarias. De hecho, todo lo contrario. Se desincentiva absolutamente la participación. Muchas veces, digamos, por comentarios y toda la experiencia que comentaba Tabata anteriormente, pero también porque el sistema de partidos políticos un poco responde hacia eso, como la ley electoral casi que pone una camisa de fuerza a cómo deberían ser los partidos políticos y no permite otro tipo de innovaciones. De hecho, cuando armamos el partido, metimos reglamentos internos y estatutos del partido que eran muchísimo más democráticos y no nos los aceptaron, ¿verdad? No los aceptaron, sino que tiene que ser una lógica muy jerárquica, porque así ha funcionado siempre, ¿verdad? Entonces es un poco complicado combatir con eso y si no, no nos iban a inscribir de todas formas, así que pues no nos quedaba de otra más que acatar esa parte. Sin embargo, es posible ir tratando de hackear un poco la ley electoral y de partidos políticos en Guatemala, aunque los esfuerzos muchas veces terminan enfrentándose a otro tipo de barreras de otro nivel. En Guatemala, por ejemplo, el 13% de mujeres, solo el Congreso está conformado solo por 13% de mujeres, ¿verdad? Nunca ha habido una mujer presidenta en el organismo ejecutivo y yo diría que la principal barrera de entrada, sin lugar a dudas, son las barreras culturales, el patriarcado y la cultura del machismo, absolutamente hegemónico, pero no solo hegemónico, sino que indisputable, ¿verdad? No hay realmente, por lo menos hasta este momento, fuerzas políticas que contundentemente se opongan a esto, aunque han empezado a haber algunos esfuerzos y algunas luces que dan cierta esperanza, pero realmente no hay una articulación mayoritaria que combata esto explícitamente. Los roles tradicionales de género están absolutamente arraigados. Yo recuerdo que nos pasó cuando estábamos intentando armar un equipo del partido en un distrito en el oriente del país que es particularmente machista, en Zacapa, para quienes son de Guatemala o quienes conocen, lo conocerán muy bien. A la primera reunión que llegaron solo hombres. Y lo que les dijimos cuando estábamos armando el partido era, miren, es importante la participación de compañeras y otro tipo de mayorías en el partido. Pues a la siguiente reunión llegaron los mismos hombres con sus esposas y las esposas estaban cocinando, ¿verdad? Entonces, lo que hicimos ahí, pues en ese momento no pudimos dar una batalla mucho más grande y decidimos simplemente no armar equipo en ese distrito, ¿verdad? Pero es un poco el reflejo, digamos, sintomático de las barreras arraigadas que están y obviamente que eventualmente nos tocará combatir. Ahora, más allá de las barreras políticas, que esas sí las podemos ir transformando, digamos, garantizando paridad en los listados que propongamos para las candidaturas de cargos internos del partido, de toma de decisiones internas del partido y también para cargos de elección popular, hay otras barreras que son muy complicadas de romper por parte de un partido político por sí mismo. Y son barreras materiales, ¿verdad? Muchas personas que buscan competir, pero no tienen cómo sostenerse económicamente y sabemos las desigualdades horizontales en Guatemala son muy fuertes. Entonces, ojalá tuviéramos recursos públicos para poder mitigar ese tipo de barreras, por ejemplo, en otras compañeras que tenían interés de participar, pero no tenían opción de dejar su vida, ¿verdad? Y su vida y digamos, la parte la familia, como decía antes, los roles tradicionales de género están muy arraigados aquí. Entonces, las barreras materiales son muy difíciles de combatir en Guatemala. Sin lugar a dudas, digamos, las barreras de otro tipo, cuotas, listados paritarios, orden, alternabilidad, priorizando distritos competitivos, eso sí lo podemos procurar en el partido y de hecho estamos encaminando los estatutos del partido hacia eso, específicamente en Semilla, pero las otras barreras son un poco más difíciles, muchísimo más difíciles de hecho de combatir y yo creo que esto tiene que ver en cierta parte también con el tema del financiamiento, pero también con las batallas culturales de otro nivel.
Muchas gracias, Samuel. Carolina?
Well, just I have a lot of common with what Samuel just said and also Tabata before she left. I am a woman in politics, and I was also a woman in the student movement. I was the first one in my university, a left-wing woman to be chosen for a very specific position in the student council. Was the first one after 14 years. So of course, a lot of women in politics have to be always kind of opening path to other women. Like other women do it for me, and I do it for other younger women. And I think, which is very interesting, in Chile right now, it's what Tabata said. We have the first constitutional convention elected that has parity, and we fought a lot for that. It was really not easy. I was also, when we negotiated and voted that law, I was chief of cabinet of a senator, so I was very, very connected to the process. It was very hard. A lot of men fought against it, and what I think it's funny about the process is that when we gave in Chile women the possibility to really run and be elected, and we had like parity in Chile had two main conditions. Half of the candidates had to be women, and also they had 50%, between 45 and 50% in the final convention. So we had a correction after. And what happened after the election is that the correction had to put more men because more women won, which was very funny because we accomplished parity, like giving the possibility of men that were beaten by women. So I think the whole what we learned for the from this process is that when women have the possibility to compete, they can win. Women, a lot of women vote for women, and we are half the population. So so we had a lot of structural walls towards women in politics. For example, before this election, women were never put first on the list because everyone would think they were less competitive. Well, we had to put them first for parity, you know, and they won. And also they received less donations, less than half than men in my country. And when people knew there were gonna be women in the convention, well, they donate, and women won. So I think it's a very important lesson we take from that. And I think it also will give us the chance, as we are writing a new constitution, to put democracy and parity as things we have to have in the future. So I don't imagine a Congress in Chile where we don't have parity again. Now we have 20% of the Congress, and I really believe after this process, women transversally from left to right will advocate for a parity in Congress also. So not only in Congress, but also in the executive power and judicial power. And I think that gives us a lot of hope, not only for Chile, but the rest of Latin America. I also was a candidate during this process. I went in the most conservative district in the whole country, so it was very probable to lose. We only won one left-wing candidate from our list within 6 total elected in the district. And I think it was a very, very interesting process for me. A lot of men explained me a lot of things I already know during the campaign. Also things in which I'm an expert, like I study those things. A lot of men wrote me very offensive things. I think sexism, it's very crude for women in politics. Very, very hurtful things. And I think also it was funny, like I literally studied development studies in one of the top 3 universities of the world, and still men would say, for example, that my master's degree was in a very, very bad university and I didn't know what I was talking about. So I think it's very frustrating for women, because you have to prove you're capable and you know what you're talking about, like every time, a lot more than men do, right? Even though you can be a specialist in what you're talking about. And also because there's a lot of sexism still in politics. So being a young woman running, in an election is very tough, because a lot of men will write you offensive things. I received a lot of invitations, like on dates, which was very, very weird. And like a lot of men won't let you do your work, and you're doing a job. Being a candidate, when you are part of a political force, it's a job. And you are doing a job for a collective, for a group of people that believe certain ideas. So there are a lot of people that won't let you do your job. And that's very frustrating, I think, for a lot of women. And also for young people. And I think this is more transversal. We had a lot of young people, for example, from LGBTQ plus community. I always have a lot of trouble saying that. I'm very happy I said it correctly. We were the party in Chile that had the biggest amount of candidates that were bisexual, trans, that were homosexual in the whole country, and that also meant a lot of work. Letting those people speak for themselves, and don't being judged or receiving violence, which happens a lot. And I think the other thing I would like to highlight in the process is that we also had a quota for indigenous people. So it is the first time in our democracy that we are gonna have an organ that has a quota for indigenous people, which are 9 recognized in Chile, but are more, like, Mapuche people, I think they have like 6 seats, and then you have Aymaras, and then you have all the others, Rapa Nui, etc. And I think that is gonna be also very important, because I would like to repeat what Tabata said. When you have role models, you can see your dreams will be bigger. And we do have a dream gap between men and women, between Black people and white people, between indigenous people and people that don't recognize themselves as indigenous. So I also hope after this this kind of prefiguration of what democracy could be in Chile, we will have a Congress with half women and also a Congress with indigenous people sitting there and making the laws of our country. And I think that could be a really, really nice prefiguration of democracies all around Latin America. Like, it's no longer acceptable not to have parity. It's no longer acceptable not to have indigenous people recognized, in a democracy. And I think that will eventually make a lot of young people that are watching this process be able to participate more in every aspect of life, not just politics. So I think what is happening in Chile, for me, it gives me a lot of hope. And I just hope little girls and are watching this process and thinking, well, I can be president of Chile. I can be in Congress. I can do whatever I want. I think that is very, very new for us in Chile.
Thank you very much, Carolina. And now going from formal representation and how you from your parties and your platforms have been able to represent a broader spectrum of the people that actually live in the country and to make the government actually reflect what the population looks like, we go to a topic that is sort of related, which is how political parties find linkages with the population. And one of the things that Latin American political parties have done traditionally, with some obvious examples in Mexico, of course, with the PRI, is clientelism. And this basically vote buying machine that use all sorts of different instruments to get people to vote for them, not necessarily granting them representation. And so the question for you is, what do you think can be done basically as political actors to start competing against this vote buying machine? And how do you run a successful campaign that doesn't rely on that and that can actually break the cycle of linkage of parties with citizens, but without the representation that represents? And let's start with you, Carolina.
Okay, I think that's a very, very difficult question. And also it's interesting because in Chile, for example, we have a very, very debilitated right that didn't even win the third. They needed to block some things that the other majority can put in the new constitution. So that happened in the election. Also, new left-wing forces had better results than traditional center-left parties, which is very new. But also, we had another list called the People's List that hate political parties. Like they come with all that narrative, anti-political parties, anti the powerful, we the people, and they won a lot of seats, like a lot, which leaves like the rest of people that were trying to do formal politics a bit like, oh my God, what is happening? Like, we are very, very confused right now. I think they are confused as well because nobody thought they would have this kind of election. Like, they had a they won like 20 seats, which is a lot, and gives them a lot of power. And these are people that never were in formal politics. These are people that come from more popular neighborhoods. So many of them don't have studies, like undergraduate studies. And also they come from like a narrative of the revolt that is a bit more violent. I wouldn't generalize, but a bit more than other parties. And I think it's very interesting because we are facing in Chile the creation or not of a new government that we hope is not right-wing, because we now have Piñera and we have a lot of people like Chile is starting after the pandemia. We have 2.5 million people like just like I will say it in Spanish, a punto de caer en la pobreza. Like they're gonna be poor, in vulnerability. Also, we have a government that repressed and was violent to a lot of people during the revolt. So we have people died, many young people lost eyes, or were sexually violentados sexualmente during the revolt. So we have a lot of like open causes regarding that. So we need a government that is not right-wing, and we needed to, in order to make the new constitution, like have a parliament that will make new laws, and we needed in order to like fight inequalities in this country, which are very, very big. Despite what people think of Chile, many economists puts us with the money of the super rich first in inequality in the whole world. We are always in the top 10. So we have people in here that live like in Germany and people that live like in Congo. And that is the reality of Chile, you know? So I think what is interesting about clientelism and the question you just asked is that isn't happening right now, because the People's List won like virtually without money. They have less than $1 for vote, which is crazy. Right-wing parties put a lot of money. Like I had a bit of money because I'm still in a small party regarding public financing, and I think I competed with people that had 10 times the amount of money I had in the district, which was the most conservative one, and we have the first majority of the right-wing party in Chile in my district, which is kind of exaggerated, like regarding the other part of the country, but they had a lot of money, and I think that this election gave us the hope that people are starting to see more than clientelism. I think we are like in a new kind of political moment where at least people in Chile understood that after the revolt things need to change, and I think that one big example we had was the previous campaign to the constitutional convention. That was the referendum, like, do you want to change the constitution, which is the organ you want to have, you know? And 80% of the people voted they wanted a new constitution. So I think we are having a complete reconfiguration of the political scenario in Chile. I don't think this means money won't have an important thing, because we know a lot of what matters in political campaigns is knowledge, and you get knowledge with money. Like it's very hard, and we still do have a lot of voters that vote for the person and not the political project. I do think people are starting to see the political project more, because People's List, nobody was known. Like they were like, everyone was people nobody knew, but people went and voted for the People's List. And I think that also changes the weight money has in the elections that are to come.
Thank you, Carolina. And I look forward, you know, there's a lot of academic researchers in this panel right now listening to you. I look forward to reading the papers about this really interesting experiment in democracy with the popular lists. Samuel.
Gracias. Sí, yo no dejo de reconocer muchísimo el triunfo de Chile, nos inspira muchísimo en la región. Yo en esta parte específicamente sobre el clientelismo y este tipo de distorsiones que ocurren en la democracia, yo separo dos tipos de clientelismo para Guatemala, y también conectándolo tal vez con algo que decía Carolina. El clientelismo que se utiliza para armar partidos políticos y el clientelismo que se usa para las elecciones, ¿verdad? El primero para mí es el más peligroso porque aquí no hay candidaturas independientes. Yo tampoco soy partidario, digamos, de las candidaturas independientes en este momento. Tal vez tendría que convencerme un poco más, pero yo creo en la importancia de los partidos políticos. Lo que pasa es que yo creo que es muy difícil con el sistema de partidos políticos superar esas barreras de entrada que hablaba en la anterior intervención. Pero el problema es que se captura precisamente a través del clientelismo para armar partidos políticos y recoger estas 25,000, 100,000 firmas que estábamos hablando anteriormente, para tener el monopolio de la participación electoral, ¿verdad? Y entonces se venden las candidaturas y este tipo de cosas, se hacen promesas de empleos futuros, si se afilia a una persona a un partido político, por ejemplo. Y esto también está conectadísimo con la facilidad y los incentivos que están puestos para el saqueo en el Estado, ¿verdad? El tema de una pobre administración pública, un bajo servicio civil, este tipo de cosas creo que ayudan o incentivan un poco la corrupción, muchísimo la corrupción. Yo creo que también ahora, esa es la parte del clientelismo que se utiliza para inscribir partidos políticos, pero el otro, el que se utiliza para las elecciones y las votaciones, tiene que ver siempre con condiciones de vida, ¿verdad? El 60% de personas en Guatemala viven en condiciones de pobreza, no están pensando realmente sobre cuál ideología les representa más necesariamente, y muchas veces el clientelismo da respuestas a problemas materiales inmediatos, sobre todo cuando tenemos un país que tiene menos del 8% de gasto social, por ejemplo, del total del gasto público. Entonces, yo creo que ante la ausencia de políticas sociales, el clientelismo muchas veces mitiga ese tipo de problemas en el cortísimo plazo y es un poco más fácil de que exista y que tenga algunos resultados. Además, está asociado muchas veces a las regiones más rurales y la mitad del país, la mitad de Guatemala es rural. Hay una correlación siempre, ¿verdad? Entre pobreza, áreas rurales, etcétera. Yo creo que esto también. Ahora, lo que puede contribuir también son los cambios en las tendencias sociodemográficas, ¿verdad? El país está entrando en una etapa importante de urbanización y esto creo que lo que permite y es una forma de combatir un poco estos fenómenos es que hay fuentes alternativas de información, ¿verdad? Hay redes sociales, el bajo costo de la difusión de los mensajes ayuda muchísimo, pero sin lugar a dudas es muy difícil de combatir así nomás. Creo que además el clientelismo electoral no siempre está asociado a mejores resultados electorales. Yo pondría en disputa esa, digamos, premisa. En Guatemala, por ejemplo, no necesariamente es la venta y compra de voluntades. Digamos, se asume que la gente, que la población es irracional, le van a dar algo material y va a llegar a votar necesariamente por eso, pero no es así, ¿verdad? Muchas veces lo que pasa es que solucionan problemas inmediatos, pero no se transforma necesariamente en votos para la persona o el partido político que dio este tipo de prácticas clientelares, digamos. Lo vimos en el 2015 cuando compitió Jimmy Morales, el anterior presidente, y ganó con un partido nuevísimo, y digamos, ayudó un poco el contexto nacional, era un outsider de la política en un momento muy convulso en Guatemala, pero eso significó que los partidos y las maquinarias clientelares no lograron superar esa digamos, resultado electoral. Entonces ahí, digamos, habría una primera duda si realmente se transforma el clientelismo siempre en mejores resultados electorales, y lo mismo pasó en las elecciones del 2019, ¿verdad? Habían auténticas maquinarias de millones de dólares, de quetzales, que no dieron los resultados electorales. Yo creo que sí tiene que ver un poco con las tendencias de cambios sociodemográficos, pero no necesariamente están asociados siempre a resultados electorales o a victorias electorales. En mi distrito, por ejemplo, aquí en la ciudad de Guatemala, hay prácticas clientelares de parte de quien ha gobernado la municipalidad de Guatemala históricamente por los últimos 20 años o más, pero eso no se traduce en resultados para las diputaciones distritales, donde ganamos con el partido con Semilla, ¿verdad? Entonces también se pone ahí en disputa realmente esta correlación que se suele asumir que existe, ¿verdad? Yo más bien lo relaciono al conocimiento, al alto conocimiento que pueden tener algunos candidatos o candidatas, y por otro lado, al antivoto, ¿verdad? Ante la ausencia de deseos de llegar a votar por una persona que representa mis aspiraciones, muchas veces lo que sucede en Guatemala, el comportamiento electoral es explicado más bien por quien no quiero que llegue. Y la segunda opción es por la que voy a votar. Y eso, digamos, se refleja en las últimas elecciones en el país, ¿verdad? Por lo menos para la presidencia. Creo que también es un poco difícil cuando es el financiamiento ilícito del crimen organizado o las cámaras empresariales, porque eso distorsiona muchísimo la democracia. Sin lugar a dudas, el clientelismo está asociado a este tipo de financiamiento ilícito, pero de nuevo, yo creo que más bien es atribuido al alto conocimiento que algunas candidaturas pueden tener más que a este fenómeno. Entonces, yo creo que tiene que haber un proceso de eliminar barreras de entrada para eliminar el clientelismo que inscribe partidos políticos, y por otro lado el financiamiento público como una alternativa creo que podría ayudar muchísimo porque reduciría un poco los gastos en términos de campaña y permite mayor acceso a información, etc.
Vale, Samuel, muchísimas gracias. Now, thanks a lot to both of you for these incredible insights regarding party politics in Latin America. Now we're going to ask some of the questions that we've been compiling from our chat and from Facebook, and feel free to answer them as much as you want. Since we didn't send it in advance, you haven't really prepared for this, so it's completely fine. For the people speaking and watching us, if you have any questions, please put it in the chat, and Diego and I will try to either bunch them or ask them to our participants before our time runs out. So the first one we have is actually from Professor Herbert Kitchell. And he says that you all identified some of the issues in party fragmentation in each one of your countries. But he's thinking a little bit more is, what about ideas? Can you think for your own country of a grand idea that could actually unite a lot of politicians and a lot of voters to rally around a single big party movement? So instead of like working in parties, thinking more of like ideas as being the sole insights for political participation. So since Samuel finished, Carolina, do you want to go first?
Okay, it's a very good idea question, and I think it's interesting because the path we have had in Chile, and that started, like, my political generation comes from the student movement, and I think that's very interesting because when we started asking for free public quality education, like, the main idea is education, but what is behind it is the end of subsidiary state. You know, it's how you walk towards a social state. You know, and it's because the whole system in Chile was made in order to privatize basic rights such as education, social security, health, etc. So when we started talking about free public quality education, we also started talking about, well, we need really good public health, and we need also education that in every level doesn't segregate people regarding the amount of money, for example, parents have. We need the right to decent housing, which is not even a right in the Chilean constitution. We also have well, everything in Chile, it's subsidiary state. Like, that is the whole. If you watch Chile, you have the true and mercantilization of rights. That is my country, you know, which is kind of funny because when I was studying in the UK, we had like a big strike of university teachers regarding social security and pensions. And they were like, so now our pensions will go to private funds that will invest in some things we don't know, and our money is going to be. And I was like, that's Chile, like, you're talking about my country. And we kind of are used to that kind of neoliberal way of existing, you know, which is, it's a culture also very hard to disinstall. And this was installed on us like by force. You know, during a dictatorship where Congress didn't existed, and well, you know the story. Chicago boys went and they like did whatever they wanted. They sold public enterprises, and you know, like, so I think, which is interesting about ideas, is that I think what the student movement started to install was the end of subsidiary state. So it's the installation of social rights as something we need to have in Chile. And that was also one of the main topics during this election. That is, well, we're going to change the constitution. We're going to change like the rules. So we can now write a new kind of state, a carer state, a social state, a state that protects rights. We can put several names to it, right? But we can end subsidiary state, and we can also end this kind of kidnap democracy we have. Because what is very interesting about Chile is that Pinochet's constitution made a democracy where it's virtually impossible to make big changes to the system. So we have an hyper-presidentialism. We had an election system that changed, but also always privileged two sides. So the right was always super represented, like regarding who they really were in numbers, with a lot of supra-majoritarian quorums for changing like a lot of laws. So when I was in the student movement, what I learned was, okay, we cannot change education in this country because the law regarding education by our constitution needs a quorum that we'll never be able to accomplish because of all of these factors. And even though we have a new law we can discuss, well, due to our hyper-presidential system, only the executive decides what laws we can discuss and when. So, like, it was a very natural transit for us to start asking for a new constitution from the student movement, and that happened to a lot of social movements in Chile. So I think now we have like a very interesting moment in matters of the programmatic regarding, I would say, 4 main topics. Feminism, like I don't know, it's exciting to see how many feminists won for to be in the Constituent Assembly. So a democracy that has parity, sexual and reproductive rights, not sexist education. Like, these are topics that are in the main agenda right now. I would say the second one is the environment. Like, the climate crisis was an issue because this is the constitution that will be able or not to contribute in the next 30 years to the climate crisis. And I would say the other two is the redistribution of power. Like, so now we're going to be able to maybe have a semi-presidential system. Some people even say a parliamentarism, which I think it's a bit crazy for Latin America, but well, maybe it can work, you know, to have like a parliamentary system, and also the redistribution of wealth, which is the main topic. Like, inequality was the main topic of the revolt. So we have now the very interesting and challenging moment where we can really ask ourselves, what kind of state do we want? Do we want a state that really can take more money from the rich, you know, and invest it in public education, in public health, and redistribute wealth? Can we have a state that, for example, will have a lot of more protagonism regarding like not bienes naturales, I'm sorry, natural, how do you say it? But I'm talking
natural
about
resources.
I don't like resources because nature is not a resource, but bienes naturales comunes. And I think those are the 4 main topics, and I think the opposition now in Chile is trying to move towards move towards a program that will be able to win this assembly, to win with a constitution that takes these four main topics. And I think it's going to be hard.
We need to cut you. Sorry. We're going to have to, as good Latin American politicians, well, as bad Latin American politicians, we need to back out of the promise that we made at the beginning, which was to give you as much time you needed for replying, because we realized that we're actually short on time. So, I'm very sorry. I apologize for that. So I'm going to move to a question now, a different question for Samuel, because our participants are very, they have a lot of questions today. So Samuel, the question for you is, and this is also a follow-up on an earlier point. This question is from Nelson Ruiz. Money helps advertise your campaign to voters and get you noticed. Well, money in general, But if you get a lot of money for your campaign, wouldn't voters be suspicious of your campaign being captured by interest? So Samuel, also to make it a little more disciplined, if you could do only 2 minutes, then I can let you know when you don't have time.
Sí, buenísimo. Voy a intentar hacer muy breve porque creo que la respuesta para mí es muy práctica con este tema en particular. Sin lugar a dudas podría generar suspicacia. Lo que pasa es que creo que sí tiene que ver más bien con el mecanismo de financiación. Con el partido lo que buscamos hacer es tener muchos financistas con pocas cuotas, con digamos poco monto por cada cuota que otorga, y no un pequeño grupo de financistas que dé una gran cantidad de dinero. También creo que para poder competir electoralmente no necesitamos tener grandísimas cantidades de dinero. Se puede optimizar muchísimo. De hecho, lo pusimos a prueba. Nosotros nos costó menos de $1 cada voto en el distrito donde yo participé. Pero claro que tiene que ver con las características del distrito, pero no necesariamente es la cantidad de dinero. Hay una, digamos, línea básica que nos permitiría operar y permitir que el partido se institucionalizara y pudiera hacer algunos viajes con más facilidad a los diferentes distritos del país, pero no es tanto el monto. Y yo creo que siendo absolutamente transparentes podría mitigar un poco ese problema de las suspicacias que podría crear este tipo de financiamiento más masivo.
Muchas gracias, Samuel. También tenemos una pregunta para Carolina. Es de Ken Roberts, y él dice que given Chile's protest movement experienced 3 major cycles in 2006, 2011, and now in 2019, why was it so hard for the traditional left, the socialists, to respond more effectively to the demands of civil society?
Okay, that's a very tricky. I will make it short. I like to talk a lot. Well, I really don't like. I have a lot of respect for the Socialist Party in my country, first of all, but I think they were also part of the problem regarding 2 main things. They were illegally financed during a period, which was very problematic for new generations. And I would say that after the dictatorship, with the return of democracy, what we call the transition in Chile, they were very active in kind of gestionar the economic model the dictatorship left. So they didn't actually make a lot of changes to the economic system that was installed, and there we had a very different ideological view with new generations, and I think that was we could see that as a generation mainly in 2006 with the called penguin revolution we had in Chile. And it's not of penguins, it's how you say like to students and in public education, because of how they dress, they look like penguins, so we call it the penguin revolution. And we saw a government that was very reticent to change the model towards social rights. And that was the first period of Bachelet. I think during the second period of Bachelet, they took a lot of the demands that were on the street. And there it comes the implementation of a completely new social policy regarding education in our country, which is called the inclusion law. But I would say that they had a lot of trouble recognizing what was happening in the streets. I think that happens when you have a lot of power during a long amount of time. And that's why I think we should have like more plural systems, a political party system that are able to include new actors more easily. In our case, we had to build another party in order to be listened. Like, you know, it was very hard on my generation. We're like, okay, the Socialist Party, they don't want to change educational policies. They are not listening to the generation that wants to end subsidiary state. We will have to do a movement, and we will have to do a party, and we will have to compete. And when we started winning, they got really afraid. So they kind of changed their views and policies. And I think that's healthy in a democracy, you know, to be able to have new generations coming. And I hope, like, when I am old, new generations are coming to say, well, we don't like what you're doing right now. You got used to power. So I think rotation is very, very important, you know, in order to have like the right incentives toward really listening what is happening in your society. And I think the political party system in Chile made many, not only the Socialist Party, but other parties as well. They weren't able to really understand what was happening because they were in the Congress for 16, 20 years, you know. They got used to clientelism as a practice. And right now, I think with this process we're living in Chile, all parties are also opening more towards new ideas and criticism, right?
Thank you, Carolina. The next one is actually addressed to Tabata, but she's not here anymore, but also to you, Carolina. But I believe that it's also appropriate. Well, there are portions in which Samuel could also, help enlighten us. This one comes from Leticia, and her question is, what is the best way to start looking for a place in politics? Is it funding a movement? Is it participating in campaigns? So in your view, what is the best way to start? So this one, I guess the context is important. She's a Brazilian woman who's trying to enter Brazilian politics, but you know, let's adapt it.
Well, Brazilian politics is very confusing. I don't know how Brazilians do it. Like, it's like when I arrived there and they were like, no, this is a party and this is a party. I was like, oh my God, like, how do you do? Well, I think that depends on everyone and on like how you like doing things. Like, I do believe in collective work in order to change things. That's for me is the main idea. But working collectively can be, for example, being an activist. It can be also being in a party, being in a movement. I think what's interesting about this new politics cycle is that we can understand participation from many points of view. I don't like understanding participation just as being enlisted in a party. That's my choice because it was my natural choice, and I'm a very militant person, so I wouldn't be able to live without being part of a collective, you know, and building together. And because I wanted to dispute institutional power, but power is not only in institutions, you know, you can build power in many other spaces. So first of all, I would ask myself, what is that I want to change? And from that answer, I would see, well, which are the best tools in order to make that change happen? I started being a volunteer when I was 14. I worked as a volunteer in many settlements, informal settlements in Chile for a long time. And I got very frustrated because as a volunteer, I wanted to change what Samuel said, inequality, what made this poverty happen, and I want to change the structures. But I realized that after 6 years of volunteering, and say, well, I love working with families, it makes a lot of sense to me, but I really want to change the reality of this. Some people have other vocations. They'd like to work with communities, and they want others to do the structural change. And I think that's valid. In my case, I wanted to attack the root of problems, and I think, as Samuel said, I think inequality is a political decision. And in order to have other political decisions to change inequality, well, you have to do politics. And in my case, that meant building a political party. I hope this political party won't become a very structured things. I also always have the temptation of saying I'm in a party that it's also kind of a movement. There are a lot of scholars talking about what are movement parties. There are a lot of examples around the world. Podemos was an example. Well, Más Madrid ahora. Even Semilla, I remember we invited a congresswoman from Semilla 2 years ago to Chile. She was in the revolt with us. I do think being able to build something that is more like a movement party, a party movement, it's very attractive as a form of having incidents in politics.
Gracias, Carolina. Samuel.
Bueno, yo tengo poco que agregar en realidad a lo que decía Carolina, estoy totalmente de acuerdo con lo que dice y creo que tal vez una parte importante, y sí, es importante, tal vez a mí me hubiera gustado que me lo hubieran dicho antes, es que la disputa política no es simplemente electoral, ¿verdad? Y hay otros espacios de poder y muchas veces no es simplemente ganar mayorías dentro de las instituciones, sino que muchas veces es la batalla cultural y la batalla por el sentido común y por lo que consideramos normal y que no lo debería ser según nuestra visión del mundo, ¿verdad? Y realmente decir no es normal ver tantos niños y niñas en la calle pasando hambre, no es normal la desigualdad horizontal, no es normal que las mujeres en Guatemala ganen 3 veces menos que los hombres por el mismo tipo de trabajo. Este tipo de cosas es un poco las batallas que van más allá de simplemente ganar puestos de elección popular y creo que eso es un poco el fondo de lo que motiva la participación política, más allá de simplemente el hecho de querer participar y aportar, intentar hacer cambios en los países, en nuestros países, en Latinoamérica en general, ¿verdad? Yo creo que es un poco ese tipo de batallas más allá de lo formal y las mayorías que se forman.
Muchísimas gracias, Samuel. And I think this concludes our event for today. First of all, again, a big thank you to our guests. I know that things are crazy in most of our countries, and just taking time to speak with us, we really appreciate it. I personally learned a lot about the different challenges and things that we discussed today about party formation, clientelism, and representation. And we hope to see you both, and also Tabata and Juanita, doing great things in your countries. Pretty much, you're already doing it, just let's keep doing it. We also want to thank our guests and the people who are listening us through Facebook, and we hope to see you all soon. Saludos y feliz tarde para todos.
Gracias, Diego.
Gracias.
Samuel.
Qué gusto.
Muchas gracias.
Muchísimas gracias por la invitación, qué gusto saludarles.